Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thanks for joining me again. Before I get into where I am and my surroundings, I'll give you a little pano shot and make a quick note that the mic that I had before stopped working. I had two of them, and so I'm kind of restricted right now to the phone mic. So I hope that's sufficient, but we'll have to make do with it for now. These mountains, and you probably can't see too well the villages on the other side of this valley, but there's a village down here. And before I tell you where I am, there's a bush here, rose hips. I don't know if you can see kind of the way the houses are laid out and designed. There's actually behind me down here a cemetery. It's a very old traditional village. In fact, I think there's been continuous habitation here for archaeological evidence suggests 3,000 years. So this is not an American village or a Canadian village. If you guessed Armenia, you are incorrect. This is actually the Republic of Georgia. And I want to continue off of the theme of the last video where I talk about city planning, layout, and in this case, village planning. And what you'll see in the video is the streets and the homes are all laid out pretty much the same way they've been for centuries, although in most cases they've been updated in the last, 100 years or more recently. But this is a really unique setting here. I'm in the mountains of south central Georgia, and the village down there behind me is called Uday. It's about 3,000 people, and it kind of spreads across the mountainside here. It's not a huge mountain. The mountain right behind me, I think right there, is probably the tallest peak. And then if you go east, which is right behind me, over that mountain ridge is the provincial capital. So we'll talk about some of these things. I'll probably show some videos from the provincial capital, Akhaltsikhe, and also from Uday, and we'll draw out some interesting observations and lessons as we go. So thanks for bearing with the lack of a mic, and hope you enjoy the video. So we'll start the video here with a little footage from Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. Georgia is also called Sakartvelo. That's what they call it in Georgian. And Kartuli is the Georgian language. So just to give a little contrast here with the smaller village, I thought starting in Tbilisi, which is what most people call it, or Tbilisi is how it's said in Kartuli, to provide a contrast. A lot of the layout of the larger cities and villages is similar, just expanded out, as you can imagine. Here we're walking up to the main cathedral. I can't remember the name of its Georgian name, but it's the Holy Trinity Cathedral. A very beautiful temple, as it's called in the Orthodox Church, or church you can call it. And my first impressions of Tbilisi as far as walkability and transportation is that it's very easy to get around. This picture here is from the old town, so you can see some of the old blended with the newer, and it's a very ancient capital. Most recently it went through the Soviet period, so you can kind of see in some cases a lot of the concrete and brutalist structures that define that period. But this is a sweeping view of the valley. You can see everything's really condensed, and there's a lot to explore here. A lot of churches, a lot of archaeological sites, and some modern places as well. A beautiful river. There's a lot going on in Tbilisi, and as far as the ability to get around and enjoy things, I think it's a really great capital. But from Tbilisi, this is the bus stop to the next location that we went, which is Achaltziche. And Achaltziche is the regional capital of Samtche Javacheti, which is the province. So you can see driving out of Tbilisi, there are a lot of dealerships, any kind of store, industrial equipment, gas, markets. Here's an apartment block, very, very simple design from the Soviet period. So those types of structures I don't find very beautiful, but it's part of the history. Here's a gas station about halfway to Achaltziche, which is about a 3-hour drive. And then you can see the countryside. Once you get out of the city, is very beautiful, and there are villages dotted along the roadways as you go, and so there's a lot of character to the countryside, and a lot of the houses have a similar type of construction. A lot of them are stone, and then they are coated over with some form of stucco on the outside and plaster on the insides, with a fairly simple kind of corrugated roofing. So it's a very practical way of building, and I've seen mostly those types of buildings for individual homes, unless you have the apartment complexes, which you see in the larger towns and cities. So this is walking into Achaltziche from the bus stop where we got off. That's the river that actually flows to Tbilisi. Or I might be mistaken. No, I think it does. I think it goes to the Caspian Sea, I was told. So here's walking down the street. You can see it's just like any other street, although some noticeable differences. In this case, some of the side streets aren't as paved. And this is the slow season, so a lot of construction and things has to wait, obviously. But the apartments are generally blocky concrete, and then you'll notice piping everywhere. That's the gas lines. They don't bury them. And oftentimes on the gas lines, there are trellises for grapes, because a lot of people make their own wine, homemade wine.
Yeah, it's been like 20 years.
There's no such thing as prohibition here. So they make wine from the grapes, and then from the remains of that, they'll make vodka called chacha. So almost everybody has vines if they can to make their own wine. And you saw in that last house, a lot of people don't have dryers, so they'll hang out their clothes to dry even in the wintertime, which is an interesting feature. This is a park plaza in the center of Achaltziche. Again, a very walkable city of about probably 20,000 people, maybe more. It's hard to get official numbers updated. There's a old ruined castle called Ramazi. Or I'm getting the name wrong. I'm blanking on it right now, but it'll come to me later. So here's just kind of a view. Everybody has cars, but you can tell that the city itself was not built for cars per se. It accommodated cars after structures were put in, which makes it still a very walkable city, even though it's fairly spread out. This whole valley, most of the city I was able to walk at least a half circle around in an hour and a half. So you can get everywhere you want by foot, but there are also taxis everywhere, little small buses called marshutkas, and they'll bring you to the cities, but also within the cities and towns. So getting around is very easy, and houses and places are at different stages of development. So a lot of places will have creative ideas. You can see this fence on my left here, just kind of slapped together, or old pieces are resalvaged or salvaged, and solutions are made with existing materials or what's available. So not everything is, the newest and best, which actually gives these places a lot of character, because there are a lot of creative solutions to building and remodeling that are fun and interesting to look at. This is a church on the top of the hill. It's actually an Armenian church, just above Achaltziche. So then about a half-hour bus ride from Achaltziche is the town of Ude, which I showed you in the beginning of the video. And this is just walking down one of the side streets. It's wintertime, so everything is covered in snow, a lot of ice. There really isn't much for snow removal, except where it's absolutely necessary. So a lot of the snow will get packed and become rutted, but it'll melt and then it'll snow again and kind of just pile up. There you can see a ruin of an old house. Some of the houses are new, some are refurbished, renovated. Others are abandoned and beyond repair. So it just depends on the situation of the family and what they chose to do with their usually ancestral home, because many of these families have been here for literally centuries. In the center of town here is a monastery, St. Eno's Monastery. There's a church inside the monastery grounds that was built in the 6th century, so it's very ancient. And here again is atop the village, not very far, maybe once you get to the top of the village to the last house, this is probably a 10-15 minute walk away. So pretty soon you're in the wilderness, and in the summer months, herders and farmers will bring their cattle and other livestock up here to graze. And this camera angle here is actually looking south, so the border with Turkey is only a couple kilometers away, and there's a border zone, those mountains with the trees all over them. You can't enter it because there's about a kilometer or two stretch of border zone that people aren't allowed to go into. This is the center of Ude by the church where the bus goes and comes. And then I thought, why not add another video of these horses, because they're beautiful. In these months, the cold months, farmers typically just let their cattle even, but also horses roam wild. And so you'll see them in random places, sometimes on the road. And when the season changes, they'll tend to corral them and start to use them for work or bring them up to the pasture lands, especially the cattle, for feeding and more close care. So back into the village, just another example of one of the roadways. The side streets are a little narrower. Sometimes people will be driving and they'll have to back up because there's not really room to pass. They'll have to back up to a place where they can pass. But you see the old stone walls on the right and left with the old house, and then some of the patchwork for fences or whatever needs to be done for renovation. So there are a lot of things to look at and admire, actually, as far as people's creativity. And so there's just not a ton of money flowing into the village, which actually is a problem because people want to leave, even though life in the village is actually very good. It's a really close community. I'm just a foreigner, so I'm just visiting, and I don't really know the language, but people are always willing to talk, and you see people standing outside all the time, just chatting and hanging out, especially in the slow season. But it's a very communal, endearing place to be. And Ude is big enough to where you can find privacy if you want. And typically with smaller towns or villages, one of the complaints is that everybody knows your business. But that's just one of the things with living close. But the nice thing is you can rely on your neighbors. People help each other out a lot, and they live with their animals. So a lot of times there are cattle walking down this street, or horses. And here, standing above Ude, giving a pano shot from west to east, you can see it's a pretty hilly town. And then down on the bottom plain there, that's also Ude. So it stretches out, and there are farms, larger farms. But even in town, people with just a small lot will grow whatever they can. People are very self-sufficient. They grow a lot of their own food, and they use most of that food throughout the winter. And then they might buy grain or something at the stores to make bread. They'll get wheat or beans or something. But it's a very charming place to live. This is a town further down the valley called Adigeni. It's actually the capital. I don't know if it's the capital or kind of administrative center for many of the surrounding villages. But we got a ride this day actually to a couple different monasteries. But I wanted to show kind of how things are laid out along this road going through Adigeni. Not quite as walkable, but there are main sections of town where it's very easy to just walk back and forth and connect with people. But there are villages that are a little more spread out. And this is basically the main road down through the valley, and then there are other roads shooting off into different villages and things. And this is a little center where the buses come, so you can get a bus, a little marshutka van, to the next town over. So interesting to see how Ude, Akhaltsikhe, and a little bit of Tbilisi are laid out. I'm sure I'll share a little more with how these villages are set up, but in future videos I'll probably talk more about the current place I'm at, which is in a totally different province in the western part of Georgia, and we'll talk more about that next time. So thanks for joining.